A brief weekend break in the street protests that have rocked Chilean major cities for weeks. In a public park in a quiet middle-class neighborhood in Santiago, a folk dance troupe parades around the square using traditional songs to serenade neighborhood residents sitting in small groups. The neighbors are discussing important topics: the cost of living, more equal access to economic opportunities, a more democratic system with less privileges for the minority rich. Under a banner that announces this is an organized town hall meeting of mobilized citizens, the people of all ages sit and talk about what is on the minds of many Chileans. Resorting to a tradition that dates back to colonial days, when Chilean communities would hold regular public meetings known as cabildos to discuss shared problems and together come up with possible solutions. Today's cabildos are a direct result of the weeks of at times violent protests that threw the country into uncertainty, left more than a dozen dead and hundreds wounded, and forced the cancellation of 2 high-profile international meetings.
Y con profundo dolor, porque este es un dolor para Chile. Ha resuelto no realizar la cumbre de APEC.
The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation and the Santiago Climate Change Conference. Both events were to attract hundreds of world leaders and thousands of delegates from around the globe. Demonstrators were protesting unequal distribution of wealth and little opportunities for development and social mobility that they say stem in part from the nature of Chile's current constitution. Which was drafted under the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet in 1980 and puts an emphasis on production and the reduction of poverty, but ended up widening the gap between the rich and the poor.
Por la desigualdad en nuestro país, y vengo con la familia, vengo con los hijos, para que se entienda que esta lucha es para ellos, es por ellos, por mis padres que dejaron los pies en la calle y que tuvieron pensiones que al final murieron, los viejos murieron con el sueño de que esto iba a cambiar. Hoy estamos tratando de que se haga realidad.
Pero pienso que el gobierno y la oposición tienen un acuerdo y eso no va a satisfacer a ustedes.
Esto es una colusión de parte del gobierno con los políticos, izquierda y derecha, un solo color ellos. Solo se apoyan entre sí. La clase política con los empresarios tienen este país sometido a un sistema en el cual nos exprimen, nos apretan y ya reventó. Esto no da para más, amigo. Esto no da para más. Por eso estamos aquí, por eso está la familia, por eso están los viejos, los jóvenes, por eso estamos todos, están los niños. No es de uno solo.
Most neighborhood groups say they are now working on proposals to make changes to Chile's constitution. They say the street protest unveiled an ugly economic reality faced by the majority of Chileans. Florencia Sillero is a psychologist in Santiago and is one of the coordinators of one of the neighborhood meetings.
Entonces ha sido un acto muy maravilloso donde nos volvemos a mirar las caras, donde nos volvemos a mirar a los ojos y construirnos y sentirnos pueblos, y no clases divididas como sí lo establece este sistema.
¿Que fueron divididos?
Que fuimos divididos completamente, un sistema individualista donde te convence que tú eres de una clase media y no eres de una clase media, y lo que necesitamos es un bienestar social para todos.
To many Chileans on the street, those who live hand to hand, the need for a more equitable distribution of resources and more social welfare is nothing new. The morning after protests had left his neighborhood supermarket reduced to rubble, Vicente Montes and his wife waited for a public bus to take them home. They had spent the day trying to withdraw some cash from their small savings account. Not too far away, in a middle-class neighborhood, upscale shopping centers operated as usual, their stores open and clients strolling in and out. To Vicente, the protests speak to a fundamental problem in the Chilean economic model.
Después de 30 y tantos años que se trató de toda esta miseria que se está viviendo, porque no ganamos, no se gana plata aquí en Chile. Aquí tenemos que sacarlo la porquería trabajando para poder ganar algunas.
The millions who turned out for the marches were calling for changes in an economic model they say has only favored a privileged few. Minimum wages at little over $500 a month are inadequate when the cost of living index is roughly double that in the country's capital and major cities. Public health services are inadequate, protesters say, and reports of government corruption are widespread.
But in Chile, that's like anathema. That's like
Economist Juan Nagel has been observing Chile for decades. He teaches business economics at one of the leading private universities in the country.
I think that everybody who lives here, and people, foreign watchers as well, realize that Chile had tremendous inequalities that weren't being addressed in an effective way. What people seem to be demanding are public goods, and it's up to the Chilean ruling elites, political, economic, academic, to really decide what they're going to do about it.
Chile has bet on trade as the model for economic success. It is the country in South America with the largest number of bilateral free trade agreements. It has opened its borders to free commerce with 64 markets around the world, signing 26 agreements to that effect, leading South America in competitiveness and income per capita. President Piñera referred to Chile as an oasis of stability and economic opportunity in South America and claimed his government was creating 176,000 new jobs every year. Showcase industries like the production and export of wine are often touted as symbols of the success of the Chilean economic model. Chile exports 75% of its wines to 150 countries around the world, reaching 1.5 billion consumers. Wines of Chile, the local trade association, says the country is implementing a strategic plan that would bring the value of wine exports to $3 billion over the next decade. Eduardo Chadwick heads the Errázuriz vineyard, which has been in his family since 1870. He was instrumental in organizing the first international blind taste testing in Berlin in 2004 that put Chilean wines on the map. He says the success of the Chilean wine industry is firmly rooted in the country's free trade policies.
Well, absolutely. I think still nowadays, Chile is the #1 country in terms of having free trade agreements. And I think also in the current economy where we see this trade war between the big countries, Chile, although we are much smaller, we have a very clear perspective and vision in terms of really encouraging free trade agreement as a mean of enhancing the economy and the life of the people that live in this APEC.
But economists say while free trade has brought about more demand for Chilean products, there is still a larger underlying problem.
What the free trade agreements have accomplished is that the industries that are already established in Chile, they've been able to access new markets. What Chile needs, Chile has a productivity problem. I mean, productivity has stopped growing in the last 10, 15, 20 years. And that has a little bit to do with the fact that our productive or our export matrix is really very similar to what it was 20 or 30 years ago. Chile still is heavily focused on minerals, on agricultural goods, on salmon, if you will, wine. These are goods and services that for a while provided a lot of value added, but now we've reached the point where we need to find new things to do. And the discovery of that is something that's not easy, and countries struggle with it. But we have lessons. We have lessons from Asia that we can follow. I don't think that the Chilean government has really woken up to the fact that this really needs to be addressed, and it has to be addressed strategically. So I think that the underlying, yes, the trade agreements help, but as long as the trade agreements help you open up new markets for new industries that can help productivity grow and that can help Chile diversify the things that it does for the world.
Chadwick agrees more has to be done to ensure the benefits free trade has brought to his sector and to others are more widespread.
It's prosperity for a country, for all the population. It's not just enough that the big companies are successful, but also that has to trickle down, or more than trickle down. I think the understanding, we all come to realize that it's not about trickling down, it's about having specific strategies to really focus on trying to have the small companies, the small family companies, to help them to prosper, and also to build infrastructure and the digitalization so that could happen at all the small and medium-sized companies of the world. So that this is specifically an objective.
Continued street protests attest to the sentiment that the Chilean system needs to be more equitable. The government announced several measures aimed at quieting the unrest, increasing contributions to public pensions by 20%, lowering electricity rates, and creating a fund to support small businesses affected by the crisis.
¿Cómo lo vamos a difundir en nuestro barrio? Vamos a hacer una en nuestros tiempos.
But the cabildos, or organized neighborhood meetings, want much more. They say the Constitution is the origin of the inequality and of the disconnect between the government and the needs of the majority.
Pero porque creen de que vamos a volver a la normalidad. Ellos nos están en estos momentos indicando y invitando a que todos volvamos a la normalidad, que para ellos les acomoda y no se quieren dar cuenta que es la normalidad donde nosotros no queremos volver.
A recent poll conducted by Chilean polling company Criteria indicates that 79% of Chileans believe the protest and citizen movements will bring about positive changes to their country.